right, the question that we have here today is this. Where's the line when it comes to experimentation in business? How much should you try whatever your brain tells you, and how much should you really dial in to what you're being told, in inverted commas, will work? Ooh, I love this question. It's sort of like the mix of intuition versus like external support, coaching, strategy. Amy, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. And it's interesting because as you're reading it, I'm thinking there's a lot of nuance there too, because it depends like what advice are you getting, right? And like, and what is your brain telling you? And where do the two meet? So it's actually an interesting question. And the first thing that comes to mind for me is sort of like levels of business or maybe like years or amount of experience. I think it's different when you're brand new. It's different when you're really seasoned. And probably because the more seasoned you are, the more experience you have, and the more you can A, trust yourself, and B, sort of have something to compare something to, like, oh, when I listened, when I didn't listen, when I followed my gut. Now, that said, I am a big fan of following your gut in many ways, because I feel like, in the instances where you do and you're like, oh, maybe uncertain, you end up usually coming out better than in the instances where you ignore your gut and then you're like, oh shit, later. So like just top level, I think I'm going to say, I think it's a mix. And I think it depends on those two things. Like how experienced are you, and how much success have you had and where are you getting your advice? So let's stay there top level and then I will, and then we can dive deeper. But what are your thoughts?
Can I add a third variable to because I agree with that, but I also think
Yeah.
something else that's so important in here is what's your current level of self-awareness? Because I also think that part of being in business is very much like a journey of self-development, right? Like you get really good insight on where your strengths are, where your weaknesses are, what your habits are, where you tend to fall over in a process, where you might overextend, all of those things. So I think the longer you're in business, not only are you more aware of what strategies might be working in a business sense or in your niche, with your clients, et cetera, but you're also more aware of your own strengths, weaknesses, capabilities, capacity, all of those things. So I think as that further develops, then I think that's also a really important piece of your gut or your intuition.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that's really true. And I think I like, is there risk tolerance involved here too in this in this
Yes.
in this decision making? And I feel like there's risk tolerance, and there's also like how much are you following what other people are doing and getting hooked, right? And how much
Mm.
are you trusting yourself, which I guess is part of the question, because there's advice that is reliable and that maybe you've paid for and you've paid for it. And then because you mentioned the coaching scenario, right, where you choose somebody because you like what they stand for, you like what they've done, you respect them, you admire them, whatever reason you chose them. And so there's probably, I would say, the majority of the advice that you're getting there is probably valid. And I only say the majority because there's always that little bit of wiggle room and there's always, I think, a little bit of need for pushback and rebellion in those situations. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. And I love that framing too. Pushback and rebellion. I love that so much. It's like, yes, I think you should interrogate any advice you're getting, even from those really trusted sources, because ideally, if you are someone who is quite self-aware, you're working on building that self-awareness, even though the person you're getting that advice and strategy from might know certain elements, around in the business sense of what might work best or what might not be a good investment of your time and energy and et cetera, et cetera. You also bring a sense of knowing about you that they probably can't yet access. So you should definitely not be afraid to voice those hesitations, I think. And I think a good coach will always be open to those things and will help you dive deeper into them to try and work out, okay, like let's unpack this, like where's this coming from? And therefore, what's it trying to tell us? And how can we listen to it? How can we factor it into, the plan here?
Yeah, I think that's really important actually. And I think it's, I mean, like as a little caveat, if you are hiring someone, I think that's a good thing to be aware of
Mm.
or to sort of be mindful of. And I think too, the term comfort zone is so overused, but it's like, I mean, we're all comfortable doing certain things, and other things, are like out of the realm of like what we could see ourselves doing or that we're comfortable with at the moment. And
Mhm.
obviously, well, I know maybe it's not obvious, but like this whole self-development piece we're talking about, it's about stretching that, right? It's about expanding your capabilities. But I think you have to do it incrementally. right? I think if
Mm.
you try and go too far, you know, some, and this is probably more like somebody else's ideas than your own intuition, but if you're trying to go too far too fast, you run into the possibility that you're just going to stumble and fall because like you
Yeah.
have to, there has to be some level of comfort or at least belief in your ability to do it or a willingness to do it. And I think that's where you get a lot of misalignment where someone's like, well, you have to do this, or you have to do it this way, or you have to do it this many times, or to this capacity. Like if it's a little uncomfortable, okay, you know, let's look at it. But if it feels like really strange or weird or like just not you, then you risk a couple of things. One is never doing it. And the other is doing it and coming off as really disingenuous, which is an awful place to be. And I think it can have a really negative effect. I don't know if I'm getting off in the weeds here too much.
No, you're not. I actually think that's like a perfect example of when you should trust your voice or your intuition in that situation where you're being presented with a solution that, feels like too big or too advanced or, too far from what you know or what you're comfortable doing. Because as you say, the most likely outcomes there are that you either won't do it because it's too scary or that you will do it and find that actually it doesn't help you get anywhere because it's such a poor fit. And this is particularly true, I think, if you have a business that is an extension of you, so that you're the face of, right? If you are intertwined with your business identity in some way, then I think it's important that there's some congruence there between what you put out into the world and what you stand for.
Yeah, 100%. Because if it's not, then what's the, I mean, and I was going to say, what's the point? But that seems a little bit like dismissive. But I also think, I mean, coming to the gut and the intuition, I mean, I think a lot of times we know. It might be an interesting thing to talk about, like, how do you know that you know, or how do you know to trust what you know? Right.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that's when you're like up this like intuitionometer going like, like, it's like flipping around and you're like, I don't know. So how do you discern that? Right. Like sort of like what right and wrong is a little black and white, but like what feels right, what feels wrong. I'll use that for lack of a better opposite. And where is it, like you said, like you have to delve deeper, like what's this coming from or what's this driven by? And is that something that needs to be addressed? Because this is in fact the right thing to do. And I think as I'm saying that, I think I'm thinking of times where I've known something is the thing I need to do, but I resist it because I don't want to do it necessarily, or it's not the thing I'd prefer to do, but I know it's the thing that will work, or it's the thing
Yes.
that's being called for in the situation. So like, what's that with like the intuition gutometer and like the actual knowledge? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. And I think that's probably the crux of the question, right? And I love this idea of a guttometer. I think that's so good. I think it's interesting. And actually, I was having a chat in a session inside of my program yesterday, and the thing we were talking about was so aligned with this. And it was about how, how do you actually respond to doubts when they come up in a process? And I think this is part of it, right? Because doubts are your intuition saying something, but it doesn't always mean that those doubts should be taken as gospel, right? Because they can just be about fear, resistance, those sorts of things. So we're actually talking about how do you like greet your doubt? Like, hello, like sit down, let's have a chat and let's talk about it. Because so often I think if you're trying to just like shut those doubts out, then you're not allowing space for your intuition. You're not allowing the possibility that it has something important to tell you. But also, if you lean too far into them, then you're allowing, your fear, your resistance, your laziness, and, sometimes to get in the way of what is actually the right move. So I think that's important. And I would also say, I think the other thing that's really important, particularly if we're talking about getting advice from other people, whether that's a coach or someone inside a program or whatever that looks like, is the power dynamics at play there. Because I think if someone is presenting themselves as all-knowing with the way forward or the thing to do, it's very hard to speak up and say, actually, I've got a weird feeling about some of these ideas or some of this strategy or, one of these approaches in here. So I think it's important as well to find someone or some place where you're encouraged to share those insights and those thoughts and those feelings, because I think you should never really be just told 100% this is what you should do and this is the thing that's worked. It should be a collaboration, right? Where you're, pairing your skills and your knowledge and, everything that's really great and unique about you with someone else who has all of those things about business or about something else, right? It's like an alchemy that happens rather than just like someone up here saying, you do this and you saying, and quietening any voices inside that, may be the gutter meter going off.
Yeah, and I think when you're working with someone in that capacity, I think it's sort of I guess one of the hallmarks of somebody who's good or that you can trust, where they're, they want to know more about that. Like, tell me more about that, and they can meet you where you are, right? It's not a hard and fast, this is, what you must do, and this is the way it's done, and and I've worked with people like that. I mean, they have a very black and white view of, what gets done and how it gets done, and like you toe up to the line, or you're, I mean, you're quoting here, not right somehow, or you're not fit for the job. And I think there are subtler degrees of that. And I think too, though, in getting advice from somebody or a coach or, whoever it is, I think the people who are really good at it can see things in you that you can't see, or that you can't see yet. And one of
Mm,
the, I think, just beautiful parts of that is somebody can have a vision for you that's entirely possible. I mean, it's not, pie in the sky bullshit, whatever. It's something that really they see that capability in you. You don't see it yet, but they can bring you along and kind of hold that vision for you. I think that's a really like excellent use of that. And I mean, where that intersects with intuition is like you still have to, like, that's what you've always got, right? Is like how you feel about it or how you respond to it. I think what we're talking about is why, and examining those things. But I think it's kind of funny because it leads, I mean, it ties into the intuition. It's like, you know it when you know it, right?
yeah.
But when you don't know it, you question,
Hmm.
right? So like when it's right, like you have that very solid, strong knowing that it's right and it feels good. And maybe you feel like, I think it's different for everyone, like maybe a little bit of anticipation or excitement, or
Hmm.
there's some like sort of jazz there that, when it's wrong, it's more like, gongs going off.
To be inside your body when this happens, all of these like really visceral metaphors or ideas, like a guttometer, like pinging the gongs,
No, no, no. Yeah.
danger, danger.
Mm,
But yes, definitely. And I think it's so important to, yeah, like to lean into those things. And I also think, I mean, we're talking about intuition here. I think really like when you know, right? I think it's actually that there are other layers that we put on top of that sense of self and sense of knowing
yeah.
around other people's expectations or our expectations or what we think success should look like or what we think we should be capable of or like whatever those things are. But it's like if you really sit with yourself and you allow yourself to just like accept what is true, I think like 9.9 times out of 10, you're going to be like, okay, I know this, right?
Yeah, and that what that's making me think too. It's like or it's like the when but the other thing that's really interesting, particularly with the kind of people that we work with, and there's so much, ability sort of to see or to think you see what's happening with other people, right? And having these
Hmm.
perceptions about how someone else is doing it or how successful they are, or whatever it is. And the interesting thing is, and tell me if you agree with this, but I think the people who, well, or I'll use the word successful, but I don't mean it in a financial sense. I mean, the people who are enjoying what they're doing, making the money they want to make. I mean, the people who are like have something that's good for them, I think, are people who do their own thing to a certain extent. I mean, like within, of course, within, acceptable parameters and like doing the things that you have to do. But I think it's like they've got their own je ne sais quoi, right? There's like a thing that's uniquely them, and that's what's attractive. And we all have that because, I mean, none of us are the same, but I think we try and like, we get a little too worried about like, am I enough like that? Or am I cookie cutter enough? Or like, well, that person's doing that, so it must be the right thing because they seem to be, whatever it is. I think there's a point in taking courage or being courageous. What was the format of this question? Is like, are you following what's in your brain or what you're being told? Or what was that what it was exactly?
I think so. Hang on. Let me refer.
Yeah.
Whatever your brain tells you.
Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah.
And how much would you really dial into what you're being told will work?
Yeah. So I guess to bring this full circle, I think it's a mix. But I think we're both arguing for what you know, and you may
Yeah.
not, but you need a methodology for recognizing that or acknowledging it or vetting it even. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And I think, accepting as well that as you do stretch that comfort zone and do things that are uncomfortable or are new or are slightly scary, like you're going to have resistance to it at some point, but that is different to like the dongs going off or the gongs going off inside you as like a hard out no, right? They're different different feelings and different responses are therefore required on the back of those, right? Something can still be right if it's uncomfortable, but something can be wrong and uncomfortable, right? Wrong for you, I guess. So
Yeah.
context is always key.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, I think we've answered this. I mean, do you think that's something like whoever's asking this can like actually sink their teeth into and use or like
I hope so.
I realized that was a loaded question the second I asked it. Was this any good? Are we right? Are we wrong? What's your gut telling you?
Gut tells me yes, and I think that this is probably the clincher. It's like it's not an exact science, right? So we're talking about it in the most concrete way that we can. And really, at the end of the day, what we're saying is, you have to lean into what you know. So we can't give you an external like set of criteria to sit down with and be like, if it's this feeling, then you shouldn't do that, or if it's that. But like, here are some things to consider because at the end of the day, you're the one who has the answers to this question. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, I think it is. And I think I'll just add one more thing. And I think that this is part of the thing that you push through to be successful in business. Again, whatever that definition of success is, like I think you sort of have to tumble through this to some extent, right? Like, because it's never I think when you start at the outset, it's like you think there's a prescribed path and you're going to go down it. And to some extent there is, but there's like all these offshoots and all these things that are going to happen and all these questions that come up. But like your willingness to ask these kinds of questions and stick with it and see those things through, I think is what actually gets you where you want to be. But it's messy. Right. And for some reason, as you were talking about that, I was thinking about, not that I've had many jobs, but I was thinking about having a job where like somebody else tells you, right, what's right and what's wrong and what's going to be done and what isn't going to be done. And so maybe like we get into that headset too. There are these black and whites where when you're doing this, it's like, I mean, I think for you and me, that's part of the fun of it. It's like that's the game aspect to it.
Yeah, definitely. It's exciting, but I guess I can understand that it can take a while to get to the point where it's exciting rather than scary, right?
Right. You're just like, somebody put up guardrails, please.
Yeah, please tell me what to do.
We all have those moments anyway, right? It's like,
Yeah.
let me turn this over to someone else. Okay, I think we've handled that one as best we can. I hope so.
I hope so too. I hope there has been something in here that's been helpful for you. If you have a question that will take us further down this path, or if you have a question that will take us in a different direction, head on over to businessbadass.co and you will find the question submission form waiting for you there.
Thanks for tuning in. We shall catch you next time.